I still remember the sound, the soft, diminishing hum of boots on gravel as my friends disappeared down the ridge, unaware that I'd stopped to refill my bottle at the creek below. I wasn't worried at first. We were only an hour from the trailhead, and I knew these hills well enough. But the junctures out here in the Bridger Range can twist a man around if he doesn't watch his footing or his thoughts. By the time I scrambled back up, there was nothing but silence and an empty, late afternoon trail. I figured I'd just meet them at the truck, take the old fire road shortcut. Only that road wasn't where I thought it was. The sun slipped behind the peaks faster than I expected, the air sharpening like a blade. I had the basics, a half-empty water bottle, a knife, a rain jacket, but no sleeping bag, no stove, not even a flashlight. I hiked until twilight turned to that deep indigo where the trees merge into one black wall. Then I knew I wasn't making it out tonight. My legs were shaking from both fatigue and the slow dawning realization that I was in for a cold camp. I found a spot halfway up a slope, under a wind-fallen spruce, the ground thick with needles and the faint smell of sap. I cleared a patch and laid my jacket down for insulation, shivering as the mountain's breath rolled down the valley. The first hour alone is always the hardest. Your mind tries to fill the silence with every possible noise. I heard what I thought was someone's voice once, then realized it was the creek echoing off the rocks. Another time, I swore a twig snap was footsteps, but it was only my own heartbeat magnifying the dark. I built a small nest of dry moss and leaves around a handful of birch bark. No matches, but I had my knife and a bit of luck. A spark from the tang against a rock, the faint curl of smoke, and then flame. Tiny, fragile, alive. I kept it low, barely more than a candle, afraid to draw attention, yet desperate for its company. Its light turned the surrounding pines into ghostly pillars. I sat there for hours, knees drawn in, feeding twigs like it was the last living thing in the world. There's a point when cold stops biting and starts seeping instead. Slow, heavy, almost gentle. I rubbed my hands until they hurt, whispered a few curses at myself for leaving the map in the truck, and then laughed out loud at the absurdity of it all. The laughter sounded strange, hollow, but it kept me awake. Somewhere past midnight, a coyote called down the valley. Then another answered, closer. I didn't feel fear, not exactly. More like an ancient awareness, the kind that reminds you you're a small thing in a big, indifferent world. I huddled closer to that little flame and made peace with it. When the fire finally guttered into a pool of orange ash, I felt its loss like a door closing. The night pressed in, dense, soundless, cold enough that each breath came out like smoke from a forge. I tucked my arms inside my jacket and tried to think of warmth instead of the numb sting creeping into my fingers. The moon rose behind thin clouds, spilling a pale silver that turned every frost-covered blade of grass into glass. I watched it slide across the sky and counted constellations, not for direction, but for company. There's something about being alone in the dark that strips away every layer of pride. All the little certainties you carry, your sense of control, your plans, your gear. They fall away until it's just you and the rhythm of your heartbeat. I'd spent years camping, teaching others how to prepare for nights like this, and yet here I was, crouched beneath a tree, whispering promises to dawn. I thought of my friends, probably worrying by now, maybe retracing the trail. I pictured their headlamps bobbing through the timber and forced myself not to expect them. Hope's a fine thing, but false hope will get you hurt out here. The sounds of the forest began to change as the night deepened. The wind moved higher up the ridge, carrying the dry rasp of branches rubbing together. Once, something padded nearby, light, cautious steps. A deer, most likely. But I could feel its eyes on me. I didn't move. Eventually, it drifted off, leaving only the rustle of leaves and my own steady breathing. I shifted to keep circulation in my legs and felt the sharp edge of my knife in my pocket. That blade became a kind of comfort, a reminder that I wasn't powerless. I scraped shallow trenches around me to divert any dew runoff, built a small lean-to from branches and my rain jacket, and tucked in as best I could. The forest has its own rhythm for those who listen. The soft fall of needles, the whisper of frost forming on bark. I listened until the fear dulled and my mind started to drift. Sometime late in the night, I woke with a start. The world was utterly still. Even the creek seemed to have quieted. For a moment, I wondered if I'd gone deaf or if the mountain itself was holding its breath. Then came a single hoot from an owl above, low and calm, as if reminding me that life went on, indifferent to my worries. I took that sound like a small gift, proof that the night was still alive, that I wasn't truly alone. I drifted in and out of a shallow, shivering sleep after that. Every time I opened my eyes, I could see the faint outline of frost forming on my boots, glinting in the moonlight like tiny shards of glass. When I finally saw the first dull grey hint of dawn through the trees, I could have wept with relief. It wasn't warm yet, but it was light, and that was enough. When morning finally came, it didn't arrive in a rush of sunlight like I'd hoped. It crept in, slow and grey, filtering through the trees as a thin, hesitant glow. My breath hung in front of me, white and steady. Every joint ached from the cold, and when I stretched, frost cracked along my sleeves. The little fire pit was a nest of blackened coals and damp ash. I stirred it with a stick, hoping for an ember, but there was nothing left to coax back to life. I stood, stamping my feet to get the blood flowing, and took stock of what I had. My water bottle was half frozen. My jacket had done its best through the night, but was stiff with dew. I still had my knife and a granola bar I'd forgotten in my pocket, smashed flat but edible. That small victory was enough to lift my spirits. There's something grounding about the first small problem you can actually solve after a night like that. Once the light strengthened, I tried to get my bearings. I'd chosen the slope the night before for its shelter, but in daylight, I saw how it overlooked a small valley with a stream winding through. I recognized the ridge on the far side, faint but familiar. Somewhere beyond it was the trail. I figured I'd have a better chance finding the others by heading downstream, since that would eventually meet the road. The world looked brand new, glazed in silver. Frost coated every blade of grass, every fallen branch, even the stones along the creek. As I walked, the sun began to rise in earnest, and the frost gave off a faint crackle, melting into beads that caught the light. I remember thinking how something so cold could look so beautiful. Every now and then, my mind drifted back to the night, the hush, the way the forest seemed to breathe with me. I realized how quickly fear had given way to focus once there was work to do. That's the quiet lesson of the wilderness. Panic wastes daylight. Keep your head down, your hands busy, and your senses sharp. About an hour down the valley, I found the remnants of a fire ring, charcoal, and a few stones blackened with soot. Not mine. My friends must have stopped here when they realized I'd gone missing. A few boot prints in the mud told me they'd gone north following the drainage. My chest filled with a wave of warmth that had nothing to do with the sun. I wasn't far behind them. Still, I took a moment to sit beside that old fire ring. I closed my eyes, felt the breeze shift, smelled the resin of the pines warming in the light. After a night of isolation, it felt like being welcomed back into the world. I took one long drink of water, slung my jacket over my shoulder, and started walking again. Steady, careful, grateful. The forest didn't seem as vast anymore. It hadn't changed, of course, but I had. By mid-morning, the sun had burned through the haze, and the world turned gold. The chill still clung to the shadows, but the light felt like forgiveness. I followed the stream, letting its murmuring guide me through stands of spruce and alder. The rhythm of my boots on damp earth was a kind of meditation. One step, then another, the sound of rushing water beside me. I found animal tracks pressed into the mud, saw where a deer had crossed, and once where something smaller, a fox maybe, had paused to drink. Everything out here had its place, its purpose. I was just another creature, trying to find mine. Around midday, I stopped at a bend in the creek, where the water pooled deep and clear. I cupped some in my hands and splashed it over my face, gasping at the cold. My reflection looked rough, red-eyed, stubbled, with pine needles stuck in my hair. But I smiled anyway. There's a certain pride in coming through the night on your own, stripped to the essentials. You don't conquer the wilderness, you earn your right to be among it. As I followed the water down, the terrain flattened into meadows dotted with deadfall and patches of sunlight. I noticed signs of civilization creeping in. Faint tire ruts in the grass, a cut log here and there, even a bit of cord left tangled in a bush. It was almost strange how quickly the world shifted from raw wilderness to the edges of human presence. My heart lifted at the sight of those small, careless traces. Not long after, I heard it, a voice, distant, faint, but unmistakable. I stopped, holding my breath. Then it came again, echoing through the trees. "Hey! Over here!" I shouted back, the sound breaking from me like a bark of relief. Through a gap in the trees, I caught movement, bright colour against the green. My friends. When I reached them, the reunion was half laughter, half disbelief. They'd spent the night farther down the trail, worried, sick, and had set out early to backtrack. They said I looked like I'd gone a week without sleep. I probably smelled worse. But when they offered me food, I just shook my head and laughed. I wasn't hungry. I was simply full. Of quiet. Of relief. Of the strange peace that only comes after fear has run its course. We sat there by the stream, telling our versions of the night. Me beneath the spruce with my little fire. Them arguing over whether to hike out for help or wait until morning. It was the kind of story that sounds funny once it's over, though at the time, none of it was. We packed up and headed down together, our boots squelching in the mud, voices filling the forest again. Behind us, the mountains stood silent, watching, unchanged. That night, back at camp, the world felt strangely loud. Voices, laughter, the clatter of cookware, all the simple sounds of people being together. I sat a little apart from the group, watching the fire. Flames danced around the logs in a rhythm that felt familiar, almost comforting. And I realized how much of myself I'd left, sitting beside that lonely ember under the spruce. The others teased me gently, asked if I'd started talking to trees or befriended any wild animals. But beneath the humour was genuine relief. They'd been scared too. None of us said it outright, but the night had humbled us all. When I crawled into my sleeping bag, the soft weight of it felt like luxury. The distant wind through the pines sounded less like warning and more like a lullaby. Sleep came heavy and unbroken. And when I woke at dawn, I stepped outside and found the meadow glittering with dew, mist curling along the quick like slow-moving smoke. The air smelled of pine, wet earth and wood ash. It struck me then. How close beauty and fear live side by side out here. One wrong turn and you're a fool shivering in the dark. One sunrise later and the same landscape feels like a gift. I took a slow walk along the water before breakfast, tracing the same current that had led me back. It gurgled and hissed over stones, steady as breath. I crouched, dipped my hand in, and let the cold bite my skin. "Thank you," I murmured. Not to anyone in particular, just to the place itself. For keeping me honest. For reminding me how little we truly need when everything else is stripped away. Later, as we broke camp and loaded the packs, I noticed how the forest had already swallowed our footprints. The grass we'd trampled stood back up. The trails of our campfire vanished beneath the morning wind. The wilderness forgets quickly, but that's its mercy. It doesn't hold grudges, doesn't boast of what it's taken or spared. It just continues, quiet, enduring, patient. As we started down the trail toward the parking lot, I looked back one last time. The sun was spilling gold through the branches, and somewhere a hawk cried out, its echo carrying across the valley. I felt small again, but this time it wasn't frightening. It was freeing. Sometimes I think about that night, when life feels too crowded, too loud. I remember the stillness, the cold, the fragile warmth of that tiny flame. I remember how fear slowly turned into respect, and respect into calm. It's easy to forget, but the wilderness has a way of reminding you. We're guests here, and every dawn we make it home is a gift worth earning.